Now, whether you're taking your dog on a road trip south of the border or adopting a pet from another country, there are a lot of things you need to keep in mind. Even if you travel internationally with your animal, there's a lot of work you have to do before you ever leave the house and take your pet with you. This time around, on our Pets and People column, Dr. Marty Hobson says that veterinarians are seeing more animals that travel across borders. And there are sometimes some concerns. She joined me in the studio. Marty, it's good to see you again.
Yes, nice to see you, Mitch.
We are talking about moving pets across borders this time around. There were some new problems we're seeing.
It's funny. We're seeing a huge increase in the last few decades to the amount that people are traveling and also how often people want to take their pets with them, whether it's just for a pleasure trip or if they're moving for school or for work. And we're also seeing more and more people rescuing individual dogs. You might go for a vacation down to Mexico and come home with a dog.
Have you seen our Facebook page from last week?
I know. And this is great, right? It's so great for the dogs and for the people. It's such a complicated topic. I don't want people to get the impression that vets are against animal rescue by any means, but people need to be aware of some of these things. We see so many new rescue groups actually facilitating the movement of lots of dogs from country to country, especially after natural disasters. I mean, this is kind of new. The real awakening moment was after Katrina, when we saw groups going down there and trying to rescue dogs that were stranded. And this is also an outcome of our digital world, right? Now you can post pictures of dogs available for adoption from Thailand or Korea or China, and you can have that dog with you in Halifax or Toronto the following week. In the 1970s and 80s, we didn't have this issue. You would not find someone, other than a rare occasion, that was bringing a dog from another country. And there's no legislation on this, Mitch. It's quite interesting. There's very few restrictions on bringing animals into Canada, and the veterinary community would like to see greater awareness and more legislation brought in.
Well, let's start with these rescue groups. Why would they need to be bringing dogs from other places into Canada?
Yeah, this is interesting. It's kind of a good news story because what we're seeing is in a lot of North America, people are having their pets spayed and neutered, and that's resulted really in a decrease in some areas, not everywhere, of dogs that are available for adoption in shelters. And also, more and more people are wanting to adopt dogs from a shelter or a rescue group versus buying from breeders. So that's resulted in a huge need and increase for these rescue organizations. And sometimes they're just moving animals from different areas of the country, for example, from northern BC or from Nunavut, but sometimes other countries or even continents. And like I said, they're providing a much needed service, and the benefit is huge, but we need to be aware.
So what is currently needed to get a dog into the country?
It depends on the age of the dog and why you're bringing it in, but really a health certificate from a veterinarian and a rabies vaccine certificate is what is needed. And depending on where the animal's coming from, you don't even know if that stuff is certified. You don't know if a licensed, reputable veterinarian has really done that health check. And nobody's keeping track. So the CFIA, Canada Food Inspection Agency, it records adult dogs that are coming in for commercial use. And that would be, say, a breeder importing a dog. But also some of these rescue dogs fall under that because the organizations are charging adoption fees, right? So that's commercial. But there's no tracking of where that animal goes and no tracking of dogs that are brought in for what's called personal use. So if you are accompanying a dog and saying it's your own pet, which many rescue organizations do, there's basically no restrictions other than this health certificate and rabies. So for example, one Calgary rescue group from an article in Maclean's, in 2012 alone, it brought in 800 dogs from the southwest U.S. and Mexico into Calgary. That's a lot of dogs moving across borders, Mitch.
And what should I be worried about? What should I be thinking about?
Well, the main thing is dogs might seem healthy when they're being imported, but they could be carrying many diseases not only that are terrible for their own health, but they're going to transmit those diseases to other dogs and some zoonotic diseases, which means diseases that can go from dogs to people. So this is a significant public health risk. And I just came across, the list is so long and so staggering, Mitch, but a couple of cool examples are babesia, which is a really rare disease in Canada. It's a tick-borne illness, and there was a case recently of a puppy coming to Ontario from the Dominican Republic, and it actually died in transit, Mitch, because of anemia. Its red blood cells were so destroyed. But if an infected dog was brought here and survived, a tick could bite it and then would transmit the disease. And this is not something that we see in Ontario or Canada. So that will spread if we don't test these dogs before coming in. Rabies, you know about, and we have that in areas of Canada, particularly in the north. But there's cases of puppies that were brought from Nunavut to other provinces, and they seemed fine, but later became sick, and they tested positive for rabies, but not before. In one case, people from Northwest Territories, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Nova Scotia were all exposed. And follow-up had to be done with all of those people to make sure that they were okay. Another disease, 3 different clusters of canine influenza from dogs imported from China. That was in 2018. And distemper is very prevalent in rescue dogs from Asia. And that includes new strains that maybe our vaccines are not going to be effective against. Heartworm in southern U.S. and Central America. We think of this as a really warm weather disease, but with global warming, if we bring heartworm positive dogs up into Canada, we will see an increase in this disease. And tons of parasites that can affect people too, with names, that I hadn't even heard of since vet school. There's just a lot of diseases out there, and right now nobody is monitoring or screening for these.
So what is the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association recommending when it comes to these dogs coming into the country?
Right. CVMA, the Veterinary Medical Association, has a fairly new policy statement, and it recommends that government begins the process of restricting movement of animals into the country, or at least having better monitoring. So we need to develop guidelines, maybe advice about high-risk areas, what vaccines should these dogs have, what parasite treatments could they have before entering the country, what testing could be done, and all of that information needs to be shared with importers, rescues, shelters, veterinarians, new owners, everybody. Quarantine is another thing to do, even if there's not an official one. Keeping a new dog to Canada isolated for about at least a month before introducing it to other dogs or people would be a great idea. There's a terrific checklist available from CVMA, and it's meant for veterinarians, but it asks a lot of questions about what to do before you even decide to import a dog, before the dog enters Canada, and afterwards. This can be found at CanadianVeterinarians.net. It's a great checklist that everybody who's considering bringing a dog in, even from a different area of Canada, never mind an international border, these things should be considered.
And we'll put up some links on Twitter and on Facebook. Marty, thanks for coming by.
Thanks a lot, Mitch.